They laughed at me inside my penthouse, but my final reveal shattered the morning poured through the glass walls of the Aurora Spire, turning the upper floors into a sea of light. From the penthouse on the very top level, the city looked like a model spread out beneath the clouds. Cars slid along the avenues like tiny toys, and the river cut through the skyline in a quiet silver ribbon. Alina stood with one hand resting lightly against the glass, her reflection faint and ghostlike over the view. She wore a tailored cream pantsuit that hugged her waist and straightened her shoulders, a style she had chosen on purpose years ago, when she promised herself she would never again appear small in any room. On her left hand, a slim diamond band caught the sunlight, elegant and understated but impossible to ignore if you looked closely. Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss our latest uploads. Behind her, she heard measured footsteps and the rustle of expensive fabric. A warm, familiar presence settled at her back as David wrapped an arm around her waist and leaned in. He smelled faintly of bergamot and paper, ink from the contracts he had been reviewing all morning. David was tall, with the calm confidence of a man who never needed to raise his voice to be heard. "You're miles away," he murmured, his chin brushing her temple as he spoke. "The board is waiting downstairs. Are you thinking about the pitch, or is it something else today?" Alina let out a quiet breath that was almost a laugh. Her eyes stayed on the city, but her mind was nowhere near the sleek offices and conference rooms of Aurora Spire. "I'm thinking about basements," she answered softly. "About the time I would have been grateful for a window that opened to an alley. And now—" Her voice faded as she lifted her gaze to the clouds gathering on the horizon. "Now I wake up on the top floor of a building I own." David's arm tightened around her, not in a possessive way, but like someone steadying a friend on a bridge that was still swaying from an old earthquake. "You don't owe any of this to luck," he said. "You fought for every inch. You paid for this view with sleepless nights and raw nerves. You prayed, worked, and kept going when people treated you like you were disposable. This is yours, Alina. All the way up." His conviction was the final push that sent her backwards in time. The view dissolved, and in its place rose a cramped living room that had once felt like a prison. The furniture was heavy and mismatched, with gaudy gold edges that chipped if you looked at them too hard. Family portraits crowded the walls, most of them featuring her ex-husband's mother in the center, wearing the same proud expression. There had never been a single photograph of Alina. She had existed there as a shadow, hovering at the edges, making tea and washing dishes while everyone else posed for the camera. On that particular afternoon, the curtains were drawn, leaving the room dim. The light bulb overhead buzzed and kept threatening to flicker out. Alina knelt on the cold tiled floor, her jeans damp where they touched the ground, her hands resting in her lap because she no longer trusted them not to shake. Across from her, on a sagging sofa covered in plastic, sat Nora, the woman who had never let her forget she wasn't good enough for her son. Next to Nora, legs crossed and arms folded, Marcus stared at his phone as if the screen were more important than the woman kneeling at his feet. "You see the problem, don't you?" Nora asked, her voice loud and sharp. Her thin finger pointed at Alina as if accusing her of a crime. "Look at Brielle. Look at her." The other woman stood by the doorway, leaning lightly against the frame with the relaxed posture of someone who knew she was being admired. Her dress clung to her curves, and the watch on her wrist sparkled every time she moved her hand. That watch alone cost more than Alina's salary for 3 months. Brielle's lips were painted a perfect berry shade, and her hair flowed in waves that had never seen the inside of a cheap salon. "She has ambition," Nora continued. "She has a presence. She walks into a room and people notice. She is running campaigns, closing deals, attending events with real people. And then there's you." Her gaze swept over Alina's tired face and modest clothes. "What did you bring to this family? A paycheck that barely covers your conditioner? We need a woman who elevates us, not an extra mouth to feed." Alina lifted her chin a little, even though her heartbeat pounded so hard it made her chest ache. "I'm trying," she whispered. "I work overtime whenever I can. I've always given Marcus everything I earn. I cook, I clean, I—" "With what?" Marcus snapped suddenly, his phone finally dropping to his knee. He stared at her with eyes that had once glowed with affection. Now they were cold and irritated. With your part-time salary in that office where no one even knows your name? Come on, Alina. Let's not pretend you've been carrying this family. My mother is right. I need someone who matches where I'm going. Where are you going? She heard the smallness in her own voice and hated it. We always talked about building together. About managing the print shop, about saving. Marcus cut her off with a bitter laugh. The print shop is stuck, and so am I. Do you know what a real partner looks like? He hooked an arm around Brielle's waist and pulled her close, as if he were showing off a prize. She knows how to move. She networks. She's already brought in investors. I could have never reached with you standing next to me in your bargain shoes. Brielle flipped her hair back and offered Alina a smile that wasn't really a smile at all. It was the slow, lazy curve of someone who knew she was winning. Don't be too hard on her, she said lightly, patting Marcus's shoulder, as if soothing a child. Some people are just small. They like small lives. They get scared when they see someone reach for more. It's not her fault. The words landed like open-handed slaps, not because of their volume, but because of how casually they were delivered, as if Alina's entire existence could be summed up in a single dismissive sentence. Nora leaned back, folding her arms. We've already talked to a lawyer, she announced. Marcus needs a serious woman beside him. He can't be wasting his prime years dragging your dead weight behind him. You're not a bad person, Alina. You're just not what we need. Alina's breath caught. She looked up at Marcus, hoping to see even a flicker of doubt, a hint of hesitation in his eyes. Instead, he stared straight ahead, past her, at the cheap TV in the corner that wasn't even turned on. Pack your things, he said, his tone flat. It's over. I already signed the papers. The car's in my name. The business is in my name. The house is my mother's. I don't want to fight. Take your clothes and whatever personal junk you have. That's it. It took her a heartbeat to understand the words, and another heartbeat to feel them land. Something inside her snapped, quietly, not like a branch breaking, but like a rope that had been stretched for too long finally giving up. Thunder growled outside, low and distant. By the time Alina dragged a small suitcase down the cracked front steps, rain was pouring from a gray sky that matched the color of her mood. The suitcase wheels snagged on every uneven tile, rattling behind her as if even her meager belongings were protesting their exile. Her hair, once carefully tied back, stuck to her cheeks in wet strands. The streetlights flicked on early, glowing through the downpour. She didn't cry. The tears had burned through her on the living room floor until there was nothing left. Instead, she looked up at the cloudy sky, rain running into her eyes, and made a promise. If this was the bottom, she would carve a ladder from it. She would not stay here. She would not return to beg. She would not spend her life regretting the day someone threw her out like worn-out shoes. I will rise, she whispered to herself, fingers tightening around the suitcase handle. Higher than you can imagine. And when I stand on my own 2 feet, I won't need your approval to breathe. Lightning flashed behind the buildings in the distance. In that moment, soaked to the bone and utterly alone, Alina planted the first invisible pillar of the empire she had yet to build. Years later, as she stood in the penthouse of Aurora Spire with David's arm around her waist and the city lying obedient at her feet, she realized she had kept every word of that vow. David's hand slid down to intertwine with hers, pulling her softly back into the present. They're almost here, he said. Mr. Thorne said a new group of applicants is insisting on seeing this penthouse. They claim they're important enough to skip the waiting list. Alina's lips curved in a faint, knowing smile that even she didn't fully understand yet. Let them come, she replied. If they can meet the price, they're welcome to try. But I'd like to watch from a distance first. I don't want anyone leaving fingerprints on what we built unless they understand what it's worth. David nodded. Then we'll start in the lobby. I've been told they've already arrived and are parking. The elevator doors closed around them with a soft chime. The city dropped away as they descended. Neither of them knew that fate had quietly chosen this day to knot the past and present together in one brutal, perfect loop. Down below, a rented black sedan rolled beneath the canopy of Aurora Spire's main entrance. 3 silhouettes sat inside, a man shifting restlessly in the front, a woman adjusting her lipstick in the mirror, and an older figure in the back craning her neck to peer up at the mirrored facade of the building as though they were approaching a palace. The car pulled to a stop at the curb. The valet stepped forward, opening the door with practiced grace. The first to emerge was Brielle, her heels tapping sharply on the stone. She wore a fitted dress in a bold color that screamed for attention, a designer bag slung over her arm, its logo turned outward like a badge. Behind her, Nora climbed out, smoothing the front of a sequined blouse that sparkled just a little too brightly under the daylight. Marcus followed last, straightening his tie with a gesture that looked more like a habit than genuine confidence. "This place is unreal," Brielle murmured, tilting her head back to take in the towering glass and steel above her. "Now this is the kind of address that sounds good when you say it in a group chat." Nora clutched her handbag tighter, eyes shining. "I can't wait to see the neighbors' faces when they hear where my son lives," she said. "They thought they were better than us with their little homes. Let them try to compete with a penthouse in Aurora Spire." Marcus swallowed hard. He had already checked his banking app twice on the drive over, scrolling past red numbers and overdue notices. He'd emptied what remained of his savings just to cover the deposit he claimed he could pay. The number still wasn't enough for what this place demanded. But he couldn't show that. All he could do now was play the part he had written for himself. The revolving doors whisked them into the lobby, and they stepped into a world of polished stone and quiet wealth. The ceiling soared overhead, decorated with rows of minimalist lights that washed the walls in a gentle glow. Soft jazz played in the background, the kind of music that assumed you had nowhere urgent to be and all the time in the world to be admired. Brielle's heels clicked loudly across the marble. She moved like she was walking down a runway, her sunglasses pushed up into her hair although there was no sun to shield her from. She seemed to expect heads to turn as she passed, and some of them did, though mostly because of how aggressively she announced her presence. Nora tottered along behind, trying to imitate the same confident stride and barely keeping her balance on heels she was not used to. Marcus trailed them, his steps slightly off-beat. Every so often, his hand touched the inside of his jacket, checking that his wallet was still there, as if someone might steal the last thin layer of his facade. The cool air in the lobby did nothing to stop the sweat beading at his temples. They reached the reception desk, where a receptionist in a simple, dark uniform greeted them with a professional smile. The woman's posture was straight, her expression calm. She had the kind of presence that suggested she'd seen all kinds of people pass through, those who truly belonged and those who desperately wanted to. "Good afternoon," she said. "Welcome to Aurora Spire. How may we assist you?" Brielle dropped her designer bag onto the counter with a soft thud, the gesture just a little too theatrical. "We're here to tour the penthouse on the top floor," she announced, projecting her voice so it carried across the lobby. "My husband is considering renting it for us. We're ready to pay a year in advance if it's worth our time." Nora lifted her chin proudly. "And we're not here for anything less than the best," she added. "My son is a director of his own company. This building will be lucky to have us." The receptionist did not flinch at the volume or the bragging. Her smile remained unchanged, but a tiny spark of amusement flashed in her eyes. "The Skyline penthouse is available for viewing today," she confirmed. "However, we must follow our standard protocol. We'll need to verify your identification and confirm a few details before one of our senior agents can escort you upstairs." "Identification," Nora repeated, her voice laced with annoyance. "What is this, a border crossing? We have money, not time to waste on unnecessary rules. Just bring us the forms. My son's card can handle whatever you charge." Marcus stepped in quickly, forcing a strained smile. "Of course," he said to the receptionist. "We'll do whatever is necessary. My mother just gets impatient with formalities. I'm sure you understand. He handed over his ID, his hand not quite steady. While the receptionist typed his details into her system, Brielle pulled out her phone. With a swipe, she opened a streaming app, angling the camera toward the ceiling, taking in the pendant lamps and glimmering marble. "Hey everyone," she cooed into the lens, her voice suddenly sweet and sugary. "Guess where I am? Touring a new place today. If everything goes well, this is going to be our new home. Look at this lobby. Insane, right? This is what happens when you don't settle for less." Marcus heard every word. Each sentence sharpened the knife already pressing into his chest, but he smiled stiffly when she turned briefly and kissed his cheek on camera. To her viewers, he was the generous husband who rose from nothing to provide everything. The fear in his eyes was invisible behind the filter. "And what are the neighbors like up there?" Brielle asked casually after she ended the stream, turning back to the receptionist. "I mean, we're talking penthouse level. I don't want to share an elevator with people who blast music at 3 in the morning or drag plastic bags around the hallways. We're used to a certain standard." "The residents on the uppermost floor are carefully screened," the receptionist replied. "Most of them are long-term executives or owners. In fact, the owner of this building maintains a private office here and visits frequently. She has very high expectations for the environment." Brielle smiled, clearly delighted by the notion of closeness to power. "Perfect. That's exactly our circle, isn't it?" She nudged Nora. "Who knows, maybe she'll join us for coffee one day. My husband's business connections could be useful to her." Nora nodded, laughing softly. "I hope she's nothing like that girl Marcus used to be married to. What was her name? Lina. That one thought a basement apartment was luxury. This is the kind of place my son truly belongs." Marcus shifted, wishing he could disappear into the polished floor. He thought of Alina's quiet patience, the night she had stayed awake with him across the table counting coins, skipping meals so he could invest in new machines. He had told himself for years that she was holding him back, that he deserved glitter and applause instead. Now, standing in a lobby where everything cost more than he could afford, he felt something sour rise in his throat. "Mr. Marcus?" A voice broke through his thoughts. A tall agent in a dark suit approached from the elevator bank. His name tag read Victor Hayes, Senior Leasing Agent. He carried a tablet and wore the same restrained smile as the receptionist, though his eyes were a little harder, the eyes of someone used to seeing behind performances. "Thank you for waiting," Victor said. "The penthouse is ready for your visit. If you'll follow me, I'll give you a full tour and explain the terms." Brielle linked her arm through Marcus's and flashed a triumphant smile. "You're about to see how we live," she whispered loud enough for nearby ears to catch. "Try to keep up." They started toward the bank of elevators. As they passed the far corner of the lobby, a private elevator door opened with a soft chime. 2 figures stepped out. Alina walked beside David, a tablet in hand as they spoke quietly about numbers and projections. Her hair was swept back in a low, effortless knot. She wore a cream dress that grazed her knees, simple but exquisitely cut. At her side, David adjusted his cufflink while checking something on his phone. They moved through the lobby like people with a purpose, not people trying to be seen. For a moment, no one noticed anyone. Then Marcus turned his head and froze. He recognized her first from the way she carried herself. Not the clothes, nor the makeup, but the posture. The once bent shoulders were straight now, the cautious gaze replaced by something calm and settled. His steps faltered. A whisper escaped him before he could stop it. "Alina." Brielle stopped too, annoyed by the sudden tug on her arm. "What is it?" she demanded, following his line of sight. When her eyes landed on Alina, they narrowed, then widened in surprise, and finally curved in a mocking smile. "Well, look at that," she said, loud enough to echo faintly off the marble. "If it isn't the girl from the past. The one who thought a hand-me-down couch was a throne." Alina's conversation with David stopped. She turned her head, her expression unreadable, seeing the three of them lined up like ghosts from a life that hardly felt real anymore. Marcus, pale and tense. Nora, already scowling. Brielle, dressed like a performance and perfectly aware of it. Small world, Brielle continued. What are you doing here? Did you get a job cleaning these floors? They are sparkling, I'll give you that. Or are you going door to door selling something? Nora stepped forward, wrinkling her nose as if the air had suddenly changed. No wonder I suddenly felt the room drop a few levels, she muttered. I was just praising this building for being exclusive. Seems even the past sneaks in through the cracks. David stiffened at Alina's side, his jaw tightening. He opened his mouth to respond, but Alina's fingers brushed his wrist, a small signal that carried a clear message. Not yet. She took in the scene with one long, steady look, then tipped her head slightly, as though acknowledging a stranger rather than an ex-husband and his family. The lobby is large enough for everyone to pass through without bumping into each other, she said in an even voice. You have a tour to catch. Don't let me delay your big moment. Brielle rolled her eyes dramatically. Still so serious, she smirked. Relax. Alina. You look tired. Are you sure you're allowed to stand around here? Buildings like this get nervous when people who don't belong stay too close to the front. Nora chuckled. And don't get any ideas about asking my son for help. Now that he's moving up, we can't afford to be weighed down by old stories. Walk quickly, dear. Some of us are going to the top. Alina's lips curved in a small, cool smile. I'm not the one borrowing ladders today, she replied. Enjoy your tour. Victor watched the exchange with thinly disguised discomfort. Sensing the rising tension, he gestured toward the elevator. If everyone is ready, we can head up now. The penthouse is prepared for your arrival. Brielle flashed one last victorious look in Alina's direction as she stepped into the elevator. Marcus avoided her gaze entirely, staring at the floor instead of the woman who had once shared every corner of his life. Nora, puffed up by the imagined victory, threw Alina a final glance of disdain. Don't worry, she said. We won't mention your name when they ask for references. The doors slid shut. The light above the elevator began to climb, floor by shining floor, as the three of them ascended toward the very roof of their own illusions. David exhaled slowly, the anger in his eyes still simmering. I should have had security escort them out for speaking to you like that, he muttered. In your building. The nerve. Alina shook her head and lifted her tablet again, as if she were merely returning to her schedule. And give them the satisfaction of a public scene, she asked calmly. They feed on noise. Let them climb. The higher pride a person takes, the harder the fall when gravity remembers them. She flicked through a list of screens until she reached a cluster of surveillance thumbnails, one of which showed the interior of the penthouse. The room was empty for the moment, waiting. Come, she said, her eyes never leaving the image. Let's go to the control room. If they want a show, we might as well watch from the best seats. Part 3. The elevator carrying Marcus, Brielle, and Nora glided upward, smooth and silent, like a secret. Inside, Brielle checked her reflection in the mirrored wall, tilting her face this way and that to find her best angle. She adjusted her necklace and smoothed imaginary wrinkles from her dress. Nora leaned heavily against the side, murmuring to herself about how impressed the neighbors would be. Marcus stared at nothing. A soft chime announced their arrival. The doors opened, revealing a private landing with a thick, muted carpet and walls lined with subtle lighting. There was only one door, tall and double, with a polished brass handle and a discreet plaque identifying it as the Skyline penthouse. When Victor opened the door, the silence was almost reverent. They stepped into a living space that seemed to float above the city. The floor was a pale stone that glowed beneath their feet. Furniture in warm neutrals and deep woods filled the room, arranged in a way that made every corner feel intentional. An entire wall was glass, framing the skyline beyond like a living painting. Clouds drifted past at eye level, and the buildings below seemed fragile and small. Nora's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh," she gasped. "Oh my." Brielle rushed straight to the windows, spreading her arms wide as she turned in a slow circle. "This is it," she said, her voice breathless. "This is life. This is what I was made for." She pressed a hand against the glass and looked down at the tiny streets. "Imagine doing a live stream from here. People will choke on their jealousy." Marcus stepped into the room with careful, measured movements, as though each tile might demand payment for being touched. He looked around slowly. The chandelier hanging over the living area spread glittering light over everything. The kitchen across the room gleamed with stainless steel appliances and matte stone counters. Beyond that, he caught glimpses of hallways that surely led to bedrooms and a private office. Victor began his practiced explanations: square footage, smart home systems, handling of deliveries, private access to the rooftop landing pad. Every word seemed to widen Nora's smile and sharpen the demands forming at the back of Brielle's throat. "This couch alone must cost more than the car you used to drive," Nora whispered to Marcus, running her hands over the buttery leather of the sofa. "All those people who laughed at us. They'll choke when they hear we live here." Brielle hopped up onto a sleek bar stool by the kitchen island and crossed her legs, the picture of relaxed ownership. "We're taking it," she declared. "Marcus, tell him we're taking it. I don't care about the price. There's no maybe here. This is where I want to sip my morning coffee and watch the city bow beneath me." Marcus forced a smile, his throat dry. His hands had begun to tremble again, but he laced his fingers together behind his back to hide it. "We're ready to discuss terms," he told Victor. "We'd like to pay the year in advance." Victor nodded. "In that case, there's a small incentive we can offer," he said. "A modest reduction for full advance payment, according to company policy. However, our standards are strict. To hold this unit, we require the first year's rent and a security deposit equivalent to 3 months' rent paid today." He laid a slim card terminal gently on the marble coffee table between them, almost ceremonial in its placement. "The total comes to 100,000, he continued. "Once the payment is processed, we can proceed with the agreements." The number echoed in Marcus's head, beating in time with his pulse. 100,000, 100,000, 100,000. He had never had that much money in one place in his entire life. Even at the peak of his business, the flow of cash had never looked like that. He cleared his throat and tried to keep his face from revealing anything. "What if we initiated the transfer tomorrow?" he asked carefully. "I've reached my daily limit today. Large transactions can be tricky." "Use the platinum card," Brielle interrupted, giving him a look that held both irritation and warning. "You told me it has a huge limit. Stop stalling. Rich people don't ask for delays like they're negotiating over vegetables." "Exactly," Nora added. "Do it now, Marcus. Money is meant to move. Hesitation is for people who don't have any." Victor didn't comment. He simply waited, his finger resting lightly on the side of the terminal. He looked like a witness rather than a participant. Marcus pulled out the card that had been his proudest possession once, the heavy, dark one that he had waved around at restaurants to feel the way people watched him sign the bill. His stomach twisted. That card now represented not power but a long chain of purchases he shouldn't have made. He handed it over. Victor slid the card through the terminal and entered the amount. Then he held the device out to Marcus. "Please enter your PIN." Marcus's finger hovered over the keypad for a second before he typed the numbers. He reminded himself that systems failed all the time, that glitches happened, that maybe the terminal would say, "error," and not the one word he dreaded. The terminal beeped. A message flashed on the screen in simple black text. Transaction declined. The air in the room shifted. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Brielle laughed awkwardly. "You must have pressed the wrong buttons," she said quickly. "He's nervous. Try again." Marcus swallowed. "Yes," he managed. "Let's try again." Victor repeated the process. The same card. The same PIN. The same amount. The same word. Declined. Nora's eyebrows shot up. What kind of card is this? She demanded. They told us platinum. Is it aluminum painted pretty? Marcus's ears burned. He reached for a second card, knowing perfectly well it was worse. This debit card was attached to an account already strangled by late fees. Still, he placed it on the table like a desperate offering. Try this one, he said quietly. Victor processed it without comment. The terminal beeped, then beeped again, a little louder this time. Insufficient funds. If the word declined had been a slap, insufficient was a strip of skin being peeled away. Victor's polite smile tightened a little. I'm sorry, he said. Without successful payment, company policy does not allow us to hold the unit. We have another client with verified funds waiting for a decision. A client? Nora snapped. Who exactly? You said this place was waiting for us. Someone pre-approved with a stronger financial profile, Victor replied, his tone still controlled. This building has a reputation to maintain. Brielle's composure cracked. The image she had built in her head, photos by the glass wall, videos from the kitchen, bragging messages to her friends, shattered in a single instant. All that remained was raw embarrassment. Her voice rose as if she could overpower reality by brute force. There's something wrong with your machine, she declared, pointing at the terminal. My husband has money. He buys me expensive things all the time. We just came here in a rental car from the executive lot. You can't treat us like this. Call your manager. Right now. Victor inhaled slowly, as though summoning patience from somewhere deep inside. I already contacted management, he said. The director is on his way up with final instructions. Until he arrives, I'm bound by procedure. If payment cannot be made, you will have to vacate the unit. Vacate? Nora repeated, outraged. We're not squatters. We were invited here. Do you know who my son is? Marcus's mind barely registered their words. He was hearing something else entirely. The quiet voice in his head that had been growing louder for months. The voice that had tried to warn him when he pawned the car, when he drained the savings his mother gave him, when he took out loan after loan to buy clothes and bags and membership fees so he could keep pretending he was rich. You built your throne out of air, it whispered. Now the wind is blowing. He saw flashbacks of nights spent lying awake, staring at the ceiling while Brielle scrolled through her feed, complaining that other women's husbands were doing more for them. He heard again the way she had said, a man who really loves me would never let me live in that cramped apartment, as if affection could be measured in square meters. His mother's voice layered over hers, describing the neighbors she planned to humiliate with their supposed new address. He had chosen all of this. And now, just when his lies were crumbling, the director of the building arrived. The door of the penthouse opened again, this time with more weight than before. The man who walked in had iron-gray hair combed neatly back and wore a suit that fit so well it had to be tailored. A slender name badge rested on his chest, Elliot Thorne, General Manager. Behind him, 2 security officers entered quietly, taking position near the door with their hands clasped behind their backs. Victor straightened, tension easing from his shoulders. Mr. Thorne, he said, thank you for coming. We're having difficulties. Thorne's gaze swept the room once, taking in the scattered contract folders, the card terminal, the flushed faces of Brielle and Nora, and Marcus standing in the middle like someone who had forgotten how to breathe. I've been briefed, Thorne said calmly. We have a unit, an unpaid deposit, and raised voices. He turned his attention to the trio. Is there something you'd like to clarify before we proceed? Brielle latched onto the opportunity with relief, mistaking his neutral tone for support. Yes, she said quickly. Your staff is treating us like scammers because of a banking error. My husband is a businessman. We came here prepared to pay in full. That little box of yours is broken. She jabbed a finger at the terminal. We demand respect. Nora nodded vigorously. My son has always handled everything with money, she added. But he can't do that if your systems are faulty. You should be apologizing, not threatening to throw us out. Thorne's expression did not change. Our bank link is functioning perfectly, he replied, gesturing toward the device. I've confirmed the transactions personally. The card you presented was rejected for insufficient funds. That is not a technical glitch. It's a factual status. The word insufficient hung in the air again, this time with the quiet authority of someone who had no reason to embellish or dramatize it. Brielle's cheeks burned. Are you accusing us of lying? She demanded. Because I can call my lawyer right now. I have a decent following online. If I tell them how this building treats paying customers, you'll regret it. You're lucky we even considered this place. Thorne studied her for a long, silent beat. Customers pay, he said finally. Guests who cannot pay do not become residents, no matter how loudly they talk about lawsuits. He lifted his chin slightly. And we record all incidents on our internal cameras, including this one. Victor shifted his weight subtly, as if remembering the moment earlier when Brielle had thrown a brochure in frustration. Thorne continued coolly. The owner of this building is extremely particular about who sets foot in the penthouse. She has made it clear that she doesn't want her home to be a stage for pretenders. He glanced toward the entrance. She is waiting outside now and intends to conduct a surprise inspection. Needless to say, she will not be pleased to find unauthorized individuals occupying her space. Owner, Marcus repeated, his voice faint. He had assumed the penthouse belonged to some faceless investor, someone whose name lived on documents and never in hallways. The owner is here? Indeed. Thorne's gaze lingered on him. She also serves as president of the company that owns the tower. She knows most of our high-level clients by name, especially those with strong portfolios in real estate or related sectors. Something like hope flickered in Marcus's eyes, fragile and desperate. It's possible that we've met, he said quickly. I have connections in business circles. Maybe if she knew who I was, she would allow us more time to complete the transfer. I'd be happy to speak with her directly. Brielle recovered some of her earlier confidence, mistaking his suggestion for a lifeline. That's right, she chimed in. The world at our level is small. Let her come in. We'll sort this out properly. You wouldn't want to risk offending a friend of the owner, would you? Thorne's mouth twitched, not exactly into a smile, but into something close. You know her well, he said quietly, though perhaps not in the way you expect. He nodded to the security guard. Open the doors, he ordered. And welcome the president of Aurora Spire. The guard pulled both doors inward. Light spilled from the hallway, and two silhouettes appeared, one in a light dress, the other in a suit. Their footsteps echoed softly across the stone. For a heartbeat, Marcus hoped it would be some distant executive he could pretend to know. Then the woman stepped fully into the room, and all hope died. Alina stood in the doorway with her chin held high. The brightness from the hallway framed her like a subtle halo, but there was nothing soft about her presence now. Confidence settled on her shoulders like a well-fitted coat. She wasn't pretending to belong here. She belonged. Beside her, David walked with the quiet authority of someone used to making decisions that affected entire floors, not just individual rooms. He carried a slim leather folder in his hand, but he was clearly not the one in charge. His role was supporter, not leader, and he walked comfortably in that place. Time didn't stop exactly, but it slowed. Brielle's mouth opened and froze. Nora's fingers tightened around her handbag strap. Marcus felt his knees wobble. What is this? Brielle demanded at last, laughing in disbelief. Is this a joke? Did you pay this man to say the building belongs to you just to impress us? How far are you willing to go to pretend you've done something with your life? Thorne stepped aside and bowed his head slightly. President Alina Ward, he said formally. Director David K. The staff is at your disposal. The honorific, the title, his posture, all of it was as clear a proclamation as any contract. Brielle's laughter faltered. President, she repeated, as if the word refused to stick to the woman in front of her. Of what? Of this, Thorne replied calmly, sweeping a hand toward the windows, the walls, the ceiling. Of Aurora Spire. Of the company that owns the land under your feet and the air above your heads. The silence that followed was total. Even the hum of the air conditioning seemed to fade. Nora was the first to break. No, she said. No. That's not possible. She used to live in my house. She counted coins at the kitchen table. She cried over grocery bills. Her voice climbed higher with each sentence. You can't expect me to believe she owns this. Alina watched them quietly. Not triumphantly. Not even angrily. Just calmly, like a surgeon about to deliver a difficult truth. She walked past Brielle without brushing against her, moved toward the sofa, and brushed a few crumbs from the leather with her fingertips. This piece was imported, she said to Thorne. And now it's covered in snack crumbs. Replace it. Or donate it. I don't want furniture in my home that has been treated carelessly. The words hit Nora harder than any insult. Her face flushed, and she took a step forward. How dare you talk like that to me, she shouted. I was your mother-in-law. Alina turned, one eyebrow lifting slightly. You were the person who told me never to set foot in your house again, she replied. You made it very clear that I was nothing to you. I accepted that. What I will not accept is disrespect inside my property. Brielle, feeling herself slide out of the center of attention, snapped back to anger as defense. She pointed at the blue folder in David's hand. Show us proof, she demanded. Anyone can stand in a nice dress and have an overpaid employee call them president. Where are the documents? David stepped forward without comment and placed the folder on the table in front of Marcus. You read, he said evenly. You know how to recognize numbers. Marcus's hands shook as he opened it. Inside, there were registry records, ownership certificates, and corporate documents. His eyes skimmed the names and titles. There was no space for denial. Alina's name appeared line after line. Her signature anchored the pages in neat strokes. The registrar's seal shone faintly at the corner. He felt the strength leave his legs and sank slowly to one knee, not out of respect, but because his body refused to keep pretending it could stand upright under this weight. Brielle snatched the folder from him, flipping through it even as denial oozed from her voice. You must have tricked someone, she muttered. You must have married into money. You must have found some weak old millionaire to cling to. You didn't do this yourself. You. Alina's gaze cut through her babbling like a blade. You're not really angry that I succeeded, she said softly. You're angry that I did it quietly. Without telling you. Without needing you as an audience. She stepped closer, stopping at a distance that forced everyone in front of her to look up. You once called me a burden, she reminded Marcus and Nora. A drag on your ambitions. You told me that my lack of shine made you ashamed. You threw me out over a promise of better days somewhere else. Her voice didn't tremble. It didn't rise. It stayed steady, like the building around them. I built my own days, she continued. I built this building. While you were chasing the illusion of success, I was studying contracts, closing deals, and signing documents that built floors under my feet. Every time it rained, I remembered the day you left me in the street. I swore I would walk into a place one day and never again wonder if someone could throw me out. Now here we are. Marcus lifted his head slowly. There were tears in his eyes, not of anger, but of something deeper and heavier. Regret. He swallowed. I don't have words. That's new, Nora muttered, but her own voice shook. The fight was draining out of her. The world she had built in her head, with a rich son and a glamorous daughter-in-law, had burned down around her in a single afternoon. Alina watched them for a long moment. Then she turned to David. They've already caused enough disturbance, she said. And the furniture will recover. We're not going to squeeze money from people who don't have any. David nodded once, though the line of his jaw suggested he would have preferred a firmer consequence. But there is a condition, Alina added, facing the trio again. You'll leave. Not through the front door. Not on the elevator you imagine yourselves entitled to. You'll go out the way you came in spiritually, through the back, where the trash is collected and the deliveries come in. You walked in here covered in borrowed pride. You'll walk out with what you truly have left. Brielle recoiled. I am not walking out like a janitor, she snapped. I am not stepping into some industrial corridor that smells like garbage. You can't make me. David pulled his phone from his pocket, his movements unhurried. We can call the police for trespassing, falsification of financial status, and harassment of staff, he said. Given your online activity, any footage we release will spread quickly. Influencer exposed as a fake at luxury tower. That sort of headline doesn't go away. The threat hit Brielle harder than anything else had. Her entire life depended on how she looked on screens. The idea of being known, not as a glamorous success story, but as a joke, terrified her. Don't, she said immediately. Please don't. We'll go. Nora opened her mouth to protest, but the look on Brielle's face stopped her. She knew that face. It was the same one she had seen earlier in the day when her daughter-in-law bragged about social status. That life meant everything to the younger woman. Not love. Not loyalty. Appearance. Alina turned away from them, her eyes drawn to the city outside the window. Your money would have never matched the rent here, she said quietly. But I won't let you leave destitute. Keep whatever is left in your account. Use it to get home. I don't want your last dollars. I never did. Her voice softened barely, the way a closed door might shift when the wind hits it. Pay attention, Marcus. This is what arrogance does. It dresses itself in silk and gold, then collapses the moment anyone asks for proof. I survived humiliation by working. You tried to avoid it by pretending it didn't exist. She turned away fully now, dismissing them from her world. Mr. Hayes, please escort our guests to the service exit. The freight elevator is the only one they'll use today. Victor inclined his head and gestured toward a side corridor near the kitchen. This way, he said. His tone held the quiet satisfaction of someone who'd watched a story straighten out after being twisted out of shape for too long. Marcus rose slowly, his legs shaky. As he passed Alina, he opened his mouth as if to speak. Her gaze remained on the view. Don't, she said softly. Save your words for the people who still depend on you. They walked toward the steel door in silence. The corridor was narrow and plain, lit with harsh white bulbs and lined with cleaning carts. The freight elevator waited at the end, wide and metal, carrying the faint smell of cardboard, disinfectant, and whatever had been hauled in or out that morning. When the doors closed behind them, the penthouse was quiet again. Only Alina, David, and the view remained. You let them go, David said after a moment, stepping beside her. No fines. No lawsuits. Just a long walk through the back corridors with their pride stripped off. Alina's reflection in the window looked tired, but not broken. You can break a person's body with punishment, she said. But what needed to break today was their illusion. Money isn't dignity. Clothes aren't respected. They'll remember this walk every time they boast. That's punishment enough. David studied her profile. You slipped something into his pocket, he said softly. On the way out. A hint of a smile crossed her lips. You noticed. What was it? A chance, she answered. One I never got when they threw me out. The side door of Aurora Spire opened into a narrow lane lined with dumpsters and delivery trucks. The scent of spoiled food, fuel, and cardboard mingled in the hot air. The three figures who stepped out looked wildly out of place here, dressed as if they had taken a wrong turn and fallen off a red carpet. Brielle stormed ahead, one hand clamped over her nose. This is disgusting, she spat. I smell like garbage. How am I supposed to go anywhere like this? Marcus followed, his shoulders slumped. Nora trailed behind them, her sequins dulled in the bleak light. None of the delivery workers or drivers paid them much attention. In this alley, the glamour they had worn like armor was just fabric and metal, shiny, but meaningless. "Brielle, wait," Marcus called. "We need to talk." She whirled on him beside an overflowing dumpster. "We are past talking," she snapped. "I married you because you said you knew how to move up. You promised me a life with private elevators and rooftop views, not back doors and shame." "I tried," he protested weakly. The business was smoking. Her voice cracked. "You let me flaunt things we couldn't afford. You lied. You pretended we were on the level Alina is on now, when you weren't even close. Do you have any idea how you've embarrassed me?" He almost laughed. Being embarrassed was what mattered to her, even now. Not the debt. Not the fact that he had dragged his mother into this nightmare. Just shame. A taxi slowed at the end of the alley, and without another word, Brielle raised her hand and waved it over. She climbed inside and slammed the door, not looking back. Marcus watched the car disappear into the traffic, taking with it the last visible piece of the future he'd built on borrowed money. Nora's hand trembled as she touched her son's shoulder. "Where does this leave us?" she whispered. "The rent is due next week. The electricity bill. We were counting on your big step." Marcus stared down at his shoes. "It leaves us where we started," he said. "Maybe lower. But alive." They took the cheapest ride they could home. The apartment that had once felt like a temporary stop now felt like a verdict. Closets hung open, Brielle's clothes and bags gone. On the table lay a single sheet of paper, heavy with finality, a note saying that divorce papers were on their way, that he was not to contact her, that she was done with illusions. That night, unable to sleep, Marcus sat outside on the worn steps leading to the building. The streetlights hummed overhead. Mosquitoes buzzed around his ankles. From inside, he could hear his mother's uneven breathing. He reached into his jacket pocket for cigarettes he didn't have, searching for something to distract him from the collapse of his life. Instead, his fingers brushed against something else, a stiff, smooth rectangle of cardstock he hadn't remembered putting there. He pulled it out. Under the glow of a weak lamp, gold letters gleamed on cream paper. Alina Ward, President, Aurora Group. On the back, written in dark ink, were words that looked like they had been drawn slowly, carefully, without hesitation. A man's worth isn't measured by what he pretends to own, but by how he faces the mess he's made. If you ever decide to stop playing at being rich and start working like you mean it, come to the rear entrance of Aurora Spire at 8 a.m. The door is always open for those willing to start from the ground up. His throat tightened. She could have left him crushed beneath the weight of his own failure. Instead, she had left him a road. Not an easy one, not glamorous, but real. It led downward first, to humility, before it could lead anywhere else. His pride rebelled instantly. The idea of mopping floors in a building where he had just posed as a millionaire felt like swallowing glass. People might see him. They might laugh. They might remember. But then he thought of Nora coughing in the dark, the stack of unpaid bills, the empty closet where Brielle's things had once been, and the way the taxi had driven away without slowing. What pride? He asked himself bitterly. What was left of it that hadn't already been shredded? At 8 o'clock sharp the next morning, the employee's entrance buzzed him in. He arrived in a plain shirt and worn trousers. Gone were the expensive watch and glossy shoes. His hair was combed, his face clean. He walked to the small security desk at the back, where Victor stood going over a clipboard. The agent turned, surprise flickering across his features when he recognized Marcus. "You came," Victor said quietly. Marcus held out the card. His voice was steady this time. "I'm here to ask for work," he said. "Any work. The president said there might be a vacancy on the maintenance team." Victor studied him for a beat, then nodded. "Follow me," he said. "But understand this. In this building, everyone starts where their skills can hold up their responsibilities. No one cares who you used to pretend to be. I understand, Marcus replied. I don't want shortcuts anymore. Upstairs, in the penthouse office, Alina stood before a row of security monitors, watching the rear entrance. On one of the screens, Marcus followed Victor down a hallway toward human resources. He's here, David said, stepping beside her. That was faster than I expected. Alina exhaled slowly. Fear is a brutal teacher, she said. He finally listened. Will you speak to him? Not yet. Let the work talk to him first. Let the routine strip away what's left of his illusions. 3 months later, the lobby floor of Aurora Spire shone like a mirror. It always had, but now there was a different kind of care in the way the tiles gleamed. A quiet attention from someone who knew how it felt to stand somewhere and feel unworthy of it. Marcus moved his mop carefully along the edge of a marble column, making sure to catch every fleck of dust. His back ached, and his hands were rougher now from cleaning agents and water, but at the end of each week, when he picked up his paycheck, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: calm. The money was small but honest. It didn't need lies to look bigger than it was. He'd used his first payments to clear the electricity bill. The second helped buy medicine for Nora, who now sat quietly by the window in the evenings instead of bragging about her imaginary rich son. At night, when she ate simple food bought with his wages, she seemed more grateful than she had ever been in a rented luxury. One afternoon, a sleek car pulled up outside. The staff straightened instinctively. The doors opened, and Alina stepped out again, award in hand, a trophy recognizing her as Businesswoman of the Year. Cameras had flashed earlier at the ceremony, but here in the lobby, there was only the soft murmur of admiration from employees who knew how much work stood behind the metal in her hands. David walked beside her, their steps matching effortlessly. Good afternoon, President. Good afternoon, Director, the receptionist greeted. As they crossed the lobby, Alina's gaze landed on Marcus. He was just setting down a trash bag and picking up his mop again, the badge on his shirt identifying him by name and role. He paused and straightened, wiping his hands quickly on his uniform trousers. President, he said, bowing his head. Director. Alina nodded once, then signaled David to wait. She walked over, stopping at a respectful distance. How is the job treating you? She asked. There was no sarcasm in the question, only genuine curiosity. Marcus met her eyes, something he would not have been able to do 3 months ago. It's good, he said. Hard, but good. My mother's lights are still on. Her medicine cabinet is full. I'm paying off debts slowly. For the first time in a long time, I know exactly how much I have, and exactly how much I owe. A hint of a smile brushed her lips. The lobby has never looked better, she said. You're better at cleaning reality than you were at cleaning up appearances. He let out a breath that was almost a laugh. I've learned that pretending to be rich is more exhausting than working, he said. At least when I go home now, I don't have to hide from anyone. He hesitated. The floor between them reflected their faces faintly. I wanted to say I'm sorry, he added, for how I treated you, for how I let them talk to you. I know an apology doesn't undo anything, but I needed to say it. Alina studied him for a moment. She saw no arrogance now, no fake confidence. Just a man who had been stripped down to whatever was left underneath. The day you walked through the back door and picked up a mop, she said quietly, was the day I forgave you. Not as an ex-wife forgiving an ex-husband, but as a person who understands what it costs to swallow pride. The past doesn't own me anymore, Marcus. It doesn't have to own you either. She turned back to David, who waited patiently. Let's not keep the board waiting, she said, her tone shifting to business. We have another floor to build. Before they reached the elevator, David paused long enough to clap Marcus lightly on the shoulder. Keep going, he said simply. Thank you, sir, Marcus replied. As the VIP elevator doors closed behind them, the lobby returned to its rhythm. People in suits hurried in and out, conversations flowed, and the city outside continued to pulse with its own heartbeat. Marcus dipped his mop back into the bucket and watched the water swirl. When he dragged it across the floor, his reflection followed him, no longer distorted by the lies he told himself. He might never be rich. He might never stand at the top of a tower as its owner. But he had something now that he had never truly owned before: responsibility. Far above, the penthouse windows caught the afternoon light. Inside, Alina set her trophy down on a shelf already crowded with framed contracts and photos of completed buildings. The award glittered, but she didn't stare at it long. She had work to do, staff to lead, plans to refine. Success, she knew, lived not in metal statues or social posts, but in the choices she made each day, the ways she treated people, and the things she was willing to walk away from. The wheel of life kept turning. In one single building, it had carried one woman from the street in the rain to the highest floor, and one man from imagined wealth to honest labor at the ground level. If you walked into Aurora Spire without knowing their story, you might think the difference between them was money, or timing, or luck. But if you watched carefully, you would see the real difference in how they moved. Alina walked like someone who had learned that every step upward required effort, sacrifice, and humility. Marcus walked like someone who had fallen and gotten back up with scraped hands and no excuses. The floor between them shone, reflecting not just the light from the ceiling, but the quiet truth that had shaped both of their lives. Clothes, cars, and addresses can be borrowed, faked, or lost overnight. But character, the willingness to face your failures, treat others with respect, and work for what you want, is the only wealth that never disappears when the banks say, insufficient funds.